Leadership is taking people on a journey where there's a vision, guidance and purpose.
Good leaders lead with the heart as well as the head.
Leadership means doing the right thing for the right reason, no matter how difficult it might be.
You're listening to Leadership Unwrapped, a podcast where you will hear from people who are living leadership every day. Hi listeners, I'm Patricia.
And I'm Niamh.
And I really enjoyed chatting to Denise, who you're going to hear in a few moments, because I was hearing about the perspective from Malta, and I'm ashamed to say it was a country's education system that I knew very little about. So I really found that interesting, but also her experience in leading at a systems level during COVID was really, really interesting. Her courage was quite remarkable, but also her capacity to move in and out between the relevant stakeholders and to bring them together, just practical and really impactful. I thought it was brilliant.
Yeah, I think what Denise brings that's amazing is that she referred to it as the triage of research, policy and practice. You know, she's been involved in all three areas very strongly and at the same time. And I think that brings such a uniqueness in the way she goes about her work and how she sees schools and she sees leadership and she sees education as a whole. And you know that from her, like I met her at a conference last year, and from speaking with her, you can see how tuned in she is to all the various cogs in the wheel. It really comes through in the conversation.
Yeah, I think she operates at a super level, and I think that'll come across in this chat. So I hope listeners, you get to enjoy it.
So we're delighted to welcome Denise Mifsud with us today. She has over 2 decades of practitioner experience in educational settings, both in teaching and high-level leadership roles within the Maltese Ministry for Education, as well as holding positions as an independent education researcher and consultant. In 2015, Denise was awarded a PhD by the University of Stirling, entitled Raising the Curtain on Relations of Power in a Maltese School Network, which we'd love to chat to you a little bit about today. We're looking forward to getting into that a bit more. Since then, Denise has held full-time lecturing posts at the University of West of Scotland, as well as being a part-time lecturer at the University of Malta. Denise is currently working in her role as Associate Professor in Educational Leadership, Management and Governance at the University of Bath. So we're delighted to welcome you here with us today, Denise. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for inviting me to speak about my leadership experience and interest.
Brilliant. And speaking of, you can see there in the introduction that I gave you, you have such a wide range of experience. And you'll definitely be able to give amazing insights on leadership. So we were wondering if we could start off by you telling us just a little bit about your journey in your career so far.
Okay, well, where do I start?
At the beginning.
I'm going to start at the very beginning. Like, as a child, I was very much into school and studying, and always looked upon my teachers, both in primary and secondary schools, as role models. And of course, the natural career choice for me was to go into teaching. I didn't even think twice about it. So I enrolled for a Bachelor of Education at the University of Malta. That was back in 1995. Wow, ages ago. And specialized in teaching English in secondary school. I was awarded a first-class honors and started my teaching career in 1999. I spent the first 10 years of my teaching career teaching secondary school boys, okay, from ages 11 to ages 16. In the meantime, I was always interested in studying and didn't envisage myself as staying in the class throughout the whole of my career. So I did an MSc in Education and Leadership at the University of Leicester. Of course, by distance learning at the time, we didn't have any Zoom or Teams, etc. So everything was done through email exchanges and then actually sending assignments by registered post. I still remember. And I always wanted to teach students at a higher level. So I moved to sixth form, where I taught English A level to sixth form students, okay, just before them entering university for around 2 years. In the meantime, I was always interested in furthering my studies, so I started my PhD at the University of Stirling as a part-time distance student, okay, back in 2011. Mind you, the word says part-time because when I was away from my job at school, I just used to spend time in my study, reading around and working on my PhD, which I managed to finish in exactly 3 years, okay? Despite being registered as a part-time student, I was putting in like full-time hours. In the meantime,
Wow.
I became deputy head, okay, at the same school. And while I was doing my PhD, I also started publishing. I was like inspired and encouraged by my then PhD supervisor, Professor Kate Watson, who's now Emeritus Professor at the University of Stirling. So she put me on this road, and I really thank her for it. And then I always wanted to get a job in academia. I started lecturing part-time at the University of Malta. But Malta is a very small island. There is only one university, and opportunities for a full-time job are very few and far between, as there is no retirement age really for academics. You can continue working till you're well into your late 80s. Also, since I was originally born in Canada, I always felt the wish to go and work abroad, away from Malta. So, after getting my PhD, I got a job as lecturer in education at the University of the West of Scotland, and I was involved in educational leadership, of course, and initial teacher education, which gave me a very good overview of the Scottish education system and Scottish schools, an experience which I relished and used later on. Then, due to unforeseen family circumstances, I returned back to Malta in 2016, and there I got a job as, first it was called college principal, and then they changed the nomenclature to head of college network, where I was responsible for leading and managing 13 state primary schools. I had 11 primary schools and 2 secondary schools, as well as being involved in high-level policymaking at the Ministry of Education. What a coincidence! Strangely enough, I had never dreamed of getting into this role because in my mind, my goal was, okay, Denise, get the PhD and then get into academia full-time and just continue. But that was the opportunity that presented itself back at the time, and I was carrying the role, okay, I had explored during my PhD study. It was an experience, okay, an experience that taught me a lot, because there I consider myself to have been at the triage of theory, policy, and practice. I was going through different identities and selves. My academic self, okay, as a recently graduated PhD student, being involved in policy making and also seeing how policy unfolded and how it was very different in practice, and also being in the midst of the practice, the teaching, the learning, the teachers, the students, and everything that came from it. So it helped me a lot. Why? Because even though this was a very demanding, not 9 to 5 job, 24/7 job, okay, where you were expected to take phone calls and continue answering emails and trying to solve any problems that cropped up in schools where you were supposed to be on holiday. This gave me a lot of food for thought, okay, and fodder for my academic writing, because I still continued publishing papers and writing book chapters and publishing monographs and edited books while I was in this role. And okay, to cut the matter short, in terms of my leadership career trajectory, the pandemic came and it made me rethink my priorities. I knew that I wanted to be in academia full-time. I had waited too long in Malta. Then I started looking for jobs in the UK. I applied for this position at the University of Bath and was offered the position 3 hours after the interview. So it was a surprise, and in 2 months I managed to turn my life around and relocate to the UK.
Yeah, brilliant. Brilliant. And I'm really glad you have, because our paths have crossed. I don't think we may have connected if you didn't make that decision. So excellent decision making is what I'm saying there.
Yeah,
So
no,
we're
we
delighted.
wouldn't. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So I hear that you were an academic at heart. And I love that phrase that you were triaging. You said theory, practice,
Policy.
and policy.
And policy.
I love that. Could you just explain that? I think that's a fantastic phrase. We might even use it as a title. It's so good.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I tried to coin it up.
Yeah, it's good.
Well, it all stems. Can I start a bit from my PhD study or no?
Sure, lovely.
Yeah, amazing.
In my PhD study, it focuses on theory and methodology. But in terms of theory, it focuses on three main things. Because, first of all, I explore how networking unfolds within education governance in the Maltese school setting. Now, in 2005, all the Maltese state schools were networked into colleges. The college is just a nomenclature, okay? Not what you understand by the American term of college. All schools were sort of grouped into colleges. There were 10 colleges, okay? 9 in Malta and 1 in Gozo, the island, which I was leading, according to their geographical location. The idea was that there would be a continuation of education for students from 3 to 16. Of course, this was a policy-mandated collegiality. The heads of schools had no control whatsoever on who they were networked with, okay, and many other sort of changes that came in the process. Besides, this necessitated the creation of a new leadership role, that of the college principal, okay? It was still called, when I was doing my PhD, who sort of acted as a liaison or came in the middle between the heads in the schools and the directors general in the ministry. So I was very interested in this new college setup and the new role. My PhD study was a case study of a particular college, which focused on three main issues: the unfolding of collegiality among the different schools which made up the network, the flow of power among the different levels between the ministry and the college, and between the college and the schools, and within the schools, and also leadership distribution. Why am I coming to this triage of theory, policy, and practice? Because when I started collecting my data, which was done via semi-structured interviews, policy analysis of this particular policy document mandating this reform, and observation of the Council of Head meeting. A Council of Head meeting is the monthly meeting mandated by this policy that started as a result of the setting up of these colleges. Okay? I noticed disparities between the leaders' narratives in private, what they told me in their one-to-one interviews, okay? How they actually practiced their leadership and collegiality in my observation of their interactions during the COH meeting, and how all this contradicted the directives, okay, of the policy document. So, for me, it was a huge disparity between what should be happening as directed from above, what the leaders told me that they were doing, and what was actually transpiring. And then that's why I came up with my particular idea of raising the curtain on power relations in a Maltese college. Because when I got really immersed in the data and started listening to the recording, then you start connecting things and then sort of comparing it to the theory I was reading, I noticed that there were a lot of cracks and disparities, okay, which I was discovering, which led me to presenting my PhD research and eventual data I found and my eventual publications using a 3-act narrative dramatization, where I make use, I coined it myself, the triple use of narrative, because narrative is my means of data collection. It is the method I use for analysis, and it is also what I use for data representation.
I think it's really interesting to use narrative because as human beings, we tell story and we learn through story, and we create narratives around even our work in order for us to be able to understand it more deeply. So I like the idea of using it as a research, not just as a way of gathering data or collecting data, but as a way of representing data in a way that we can relate to. I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, because I wanted to find like an unconventional method, okay? And I wanted to show rather than just tell how this dysfunctional networked leadership is unfolding within the Maltese schools. And I think it's also a good way of getting across not only to academics, because after all, we don't just do our research for academics, but of reaching across to a practitioner audience, because it would resonate more with their daily lives.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. And why do you think there was disparity between their private discourse to you and what they were doing in practice? Why do you think that was happening?
Okay. Like, first of all, as I said before, the heads of school had no control whatsoever, for example, on how they were networked, why they were networked. It was just a policy and that's it. Okay?
Yeah.
Although the policy document said it's a means of doing away with the centralization, okay, of the ministry and creating more autonomy, it shows that the opposite thing happened. Okay? For example, leadership was distributed in a very directive manner, and they had a very minor say over what decisions they could take within their own schools. Another thing, this collegiality created a lot of disparities because, for example, within the college itself, there was a big divide between the primary school heads and the secondary school heads because they didn't find anything they could relate on. Another thing is, instead of creating more collegiality, besides there being networks within the college network, it was a matter of intra-networking, not inter-networking, because then the colleges were just isolated entities on their own. The individual schools felt a loss of identity, for example, and power. There were a lot of power struggles and power issues, even between the college principal, for example, the directors general and the ministry, because, and I experienced it later myself, the college principal can make decisions for his or her own college. Okay, you have to accept everything from above. So the policy presented one way of networking, but things were unfolding in a very dysfunctional way.
I think that's a real insight around educational change, isn't it? That you can't force it from the top down, that it has to come from, it has to align with the values and the ways of working of schools in order for it to work. But if you impose it, it's dysfunctional. I think that it's really interesting that your research is almost like I know you use the word case study, but a perfect case study to show that sort of example of how imposed, even though the idea seems like a good one. So more distribution, more collegiality, more networking, all sounds like the way we want to go in education, but just telling you to do it, contriving it, to use Andy Hargrave's phrase, but contriving that collegiality is not good. It's really interesting.
And then I experienced this contrived collegiality myself for 4.5 years, okay, when I was practicing head of college network.
And how do you manage that space and stay healthy when you're in that's stressful. So how do you hold that management leadership role and I don't know, stay well, I suppose is the question I would ask.
Okay, if you're asking me in terms of work-life balance, it was a very unhealthy one. But something which kept, it was very unhealthy, okay, because it was a very, very stressful position because you have also a lot of pressure from above, from the ministry. I'm not going to mention what, but Malta is a very small country and there's a lot of nepotism involved.
Yeah.
And like you suffer, like I'm a very straightforward person and I abide by the rules. There are issues where you can bend the rules a bit, okay? But there are other instances when you have to be fair. And I am also very fair and just, okay? Because I don't want injustice to happen in my regards, so I don't want it to happen to others.
Yeah.
So when you receive phone calls to, okay, do this, do that, and you refuse because it goes against your principles, you suffer as a result. But I happily took that suffering. How did I manage to survive? Strangely enough, I'm a very sort of outdoor and person who likes sports. So going to the gym kept me healthy, swimming, going for long walks in the countryside because I could think about my work and I found like a lot of solutions to my problems when I was just on my own in the countryside. But the thing that kept me most alive was my writing, okay, and academic publishing.
Okay.
Other people would see it as stressful, but for me, it was like a release. And it also gave me a lot of ideas on what to write and made me want to look into social justice, for example, policy, reception, and enactment.
Yeah. Well, that position and that the triage, as you described it, like being able to be part of research policy and practice. I mean, they're the three things that anyone working in academia is striving to try and create alignment between. But so often we might have experience in, you know, people involved in not academia, I suppose, people involved in the space of school improvement are usually aligned with one of those, maybe two, you know, but very few people would have the experience that you've had with all three of them, which makes you, you know, puts you in an incredible position for the impact that you could have and that your research is having.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I do. And like mostly when I'm speaking with my ED students, okay, all our ED students are education practitioners, okay? It helps me a lot and they relate a lot to me because I always draw on my practitioner experience.
I think especially in our field of leadership, when we're teaching leadership and developing leadership, being able to blend the experience, it's very important. You know, I've always felt that teaching experience is very important in initial teacher education anyway, but it's more and more important when we do the kind of work that we do now. But it's also really interesting for me in my career trajectory when the times were tough and there was some pretty tough years, my sanity was in my writing too. The sanity was in researching and publishing and because it was my way of working out an understanding of what I was seeing. And we've done some work with teachers who've been in tough situations in staff rooms where the collegiality is broken and it can be really, really tough. And they talk about their survival mechanism being studying for a master's or taking on an academic piece of learning as a way of coming to terms and understanding what was going on for them.
Yeah, professional development.
It's really important, I think, that
it is
motivations for it vary.
Especially really after the experience of the pandemic, where, okay, I experienced that firsthand.
Very much
okay?
so.
I remember, like, overnight, the Prime Minister, back in 2020, announcing the closure of schools. It was just overnight, okay? We were at a meeting at the ministry, I remember. It was around 8 p.m. and he told us, look, schools are going to close for tomorrow, we don't know for how long, etc. It is something which I look back upon with some regret, but also with pleasure, because there were a lot of uncertainties among all the stakeholders involved, okay, especially in the first weeks. So much so that then I set up like a small research group and we're researching like the unfolding of policy, educational leadership, etc. among England, Malta, Australia and Scotland. And they also did a minor study on this about the experiences of parents who had to juggle a full-time job and become their kids teachers, sort of. And the results are very interesting, even when it comes to the teachers. Okay?
Yeah.
Teachers, overnight, they had to switch to a system which no one had prepared them for. And so I think that they had a lot of agency. Okay, of course, depending on the different contexts and countries they happened to be in. Because I know how things unfolded in education in Malta were very different from how it unfolded in England or in Australia, where in Malta it was very much a laissez-faire attitude when it comes to teaching and learning provision, for example, much to the detriment of the students involved, okay? But that's the subject of another podcast, to be speaking about the pandemic alone.
Okay.
But I believe
a few
very
podcasts,
much,
I'd say.
that teacher agency came to the fore, and I saw it like with my own eyes. There were teachers who overnight turned, for example, their sitting room or even their garages into a classroom where they started recording lessons and doing this. Others didn't engage with the students at all. Others just sent them handouts, okay? It was a very different experience for me, and it was disheartening because I regretted like seeing certain practices which I had no control of whatsoever. But teacher leadership came to the fore because for me, when I used to go, I lead by example and I walk the talk, okay? I didn't stay closed in my office. I used to visit schools and go into classrooms and talk to teachers and students almost every day. And I used to tell them, look, because they used to tell me, okay, we're just a class teacher or we're just a subject teacher. I told them, no way. First of all, you are the most important role model for the student. And you are leaders, okay? You are the teacher, you are the leader in your own classroom. For example, when a student misbehaves, don't just take him to the head's office. You have to deal with it. I believe in teacher leadership very much, okay? And that's something I would like, it's on my to-do research list. I would like to explore it more, to understand what teachers understand by the term leadership, how they practice it, etc. Because I also believe that teacher education is not just initial teacher education, but it runs right across the whole teacher trajectory, from pre-service education to induction up through retirement, because there are always opportunities to learn.
Yeah, I very much agree with that. And I think my thoughts are going to how we're investing in that, how we're supporting that trajectory across the career, the education across the career. But I would love to see a study that looks more in depth at how teachers understand teacher leadership and teacher leadership within the classroom, but also outside of it, leading colleagues in learning in their disciplines or within their staff rooms. I think there's some amazing work that needs to be done there. And I think I would say also with COVID, I saw amazing agency come to the fore in both school leaders, principals and teachers. But in Ireland too, we saw the variety of support for children. So some teachers were handouts and that was it. Other teachers, well, as a mom, I was seeing it where the kids were online synchronously and classrooms were happening differently. So we had the range of that too. It was interesting to see the differences. Even within a school, it was interesting to see the differences, I thought.
Yeah, I think there's definitely such a space to further explore what it is that we mean by teacher leadership and what, as you say, what do teachers understand teacher leadership to be? Because like it's coming up in my PhD there, the further I got into the data collection and the more I was thinking about it and reflecting on it as well, like people are referring to teacher leadership as very different things, and that's come across in my data. You know, in some aspects it's, you know, first of all, in some parts of it, it's teachers just stay in their lane. You know, that's what they're expected to do. You know, some people have come back and said that there isn't the place for teacher leadership, which I don't know what I necessarily align with myself, but it's something that came out in some respects. But then when people who supported teacher leadership or spoke about it, that it was happening within their schools, it was very varied from being the leaders within their own classroom to taking on lots of different responsibilities. And I think there is a potential danger of people thinking about teacher leadership as just what's happening in the classroom without creating that further space for teachers to flourish and take on the autonomy that we're describing here.
Yeah. I think even I'm very interested in how some teachers have created communities of practice. They might say, look, we need to, in their staff rooms, they might say, this is an area we want to develop. So I gave a talk at something in a summer school, and this teacher spoke to me afterwards, and he said, we're very interested in action research. So I've brought together a group of colleagues, and do you know of any books that would help us? Because we're all going to visit X place and we're saving, and they were paying for it themselves. And I was going, that's leadership. That's teacher leadership in a nutshell, about saying we want to improve our practice. So we've got together to do this. And as somebody who teaches leadership, I'd love to know how I can support that more. That's the piece. How do we develop that area? So that's, for me, it's really interesting too.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's something I definitely would like to have the time to explore, perhaps in the coming academic year. And also see how this is understood across different contexts. Because, for example, I don't know, I'm a bit familiar with the Scottish education system and also the induction system, etc. And I know that teachers are given a lot of support, during the initial years. They are in the classroom, and they also have the professional standards for registration at different levels of leadership. That's something, for example, that doesn't exist in Malta. There are a lot of good teachers and dedicated teachers who use their own time and finances, etc., to pursue postgraduate diploma, masters, etc., and then a professional development opportunity that comes up. But I would like to see something which is organized at a more national level, for example. So I would like to explore this. What do teachers understand by leadership? Leadership inside at different levels, within the classroom, within the staff room, within the school, within the community, and within the education system at large. Because they do make a difference. And how do head teachers understand teacher leadership? Do they empower them? For example, you recognize, I also believe, in the saying that a leader is born. I know that leadership can be nurtured, but if you're not a natural leader, I don't know, how far you can go. So whenever I saw teachers, and it would come out, they would shine, who were leaders, I used to encourage them to apply for leadership posts.
This is really important, Denise, because I've learned this myself as a leader, that people don't always see themselves as leaders, but yet they're showing so much leadership. And you say to them, have you seen this? And this would be good because look what you're already doing. And they're like, oh, no, I don't see that in myself. And it just takes someone to plant the seed for that person to begin to see themselves in their leadership role or their potential. So we need to do a lot more of that too. I feel that's very important.
Yeah, and even in bringing teachers together, for example, since with hindsight, I knew of the sort of obstacles to networking and collegiality from my PhD study. And the college I led was on the island of Gozo, where there were these 13 state schools and there were another 6 church schools, which I was not responsible for because they belong to the church sort of secretariat. But I still made sure, since we were living on an island, the kids then after school, they go to sports practice together, to religious lessons together, etc. So they do mix. I made sure I found ways to bring both the heads of my schools and the church schools together, and even teachers and even students, because I set up these student councils, and I used to meet them. It was very formal. Each school had a student council. We used to meet. I used to listen, to their voices. And then I made sure that these met with the students' councils from the church schools, for example. So I believe it's a matter of trying to bring teachers together. Teachers, especially at primary school, especially in small schools, they don't have the opportunity to talk or network with teachers like at the same level. So, for example, I created a system in such a way that teachers of a certain year group used to meet once a term. I had a big boardroom in my office building, and I also, the first year, I brought the teachers. Then the second year round, where they used to discuss literacy and numeracy, for example, I even included the learning support educators, okay, who used to give a lot of help in the classroom. So it's all a matter of bringing like people together, even with, okay, something which is also very close to heart and which now has become an area of study for me is social justice and equity in schools. Because the arrival of migrants in Malta, especially in Gozo, has been a very recent phenomenon. Because like before, the only foreign students we had were the returned migrants of people from Canada, like I had been once when I started primary school, the United States, Australia, and the UK. So they used to speak in English. They caught up with Maltese very quickly because that was the language that was spoken at home. So they had no problems. But then, due to a shortage of skills, okay, and the creation of more jobs, a lot of people started coming in from different countries. Like, for example, in my college alone, I had students from over 40 different nationalities, which was something which was very novel for the small island of Gozo with a population of 35,000 people. So, heads started regarding them as the other, okay? Because they said, we have problems because of their different culture, language issues, because they wouldn't know Maltese. Of course, some of them wouldn't know English. And also, because of differences in religious beliefs. Why? Because Malta, I think, like Ireland, the majority of the people are Catholic. So, teachers found that problem when not all the students in class are Catholic, especially at primary level. So I tried to do everything possible. I am very inclusive by nature, not just because of my position. And I try to create a lot of awareness. For example, by creating the Multicultural Week, where each class had to choose a particular nation and celebrate it. Then on the Friday, we would have this big multicultural celebration where I invited all the parents. I also realized that these sort of parents of the migrant kids were being left out. So I created like a support group for them, and they continue meeting like to the day, where I also make sure that they integrate with the other parents. You know, you try to come up with initiatives to try to bring people together.
Yeah.
Because for me, leadership like is being out there, trying to bring people together, lead from the ground, and also building a lot on relations.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it's looking at the whole school community as well. I mean, it's not even just focusing in on the students, but it's looking at the parents and what needs are there within the community that I can contribute to helping and make it a more inclusive space. I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, and I also used to
I think it's really important.
Yeah, with the parish priests as well, okay, because they were part of the community, and also with the local councils, you know, to try and bring everybody together.
Yeah. Did you find them open to that? Yeah.
Yes, they were very open.
That's brilliant. Yeah. Sometimes it just takes someone to name it and say, let's do something about it. I pick up very much from you. That's how you are. I think from each time we've met, I feel you're very much, you see something and you do. So that is leadership in action, I must say.
Yeah, that's how I reached out. I remember I laugh about it when I think about it now. Okay, I'm a practicing Roman Catholic. So I reached out. It was the newly appointed bishop. There was always this sort of tendency where on the Friday, the first Friday of each month, it was either a priest from the village, okay? He used to come and say mass at the school, etc. So I thought, why not extend it further? So I wrote to this bishop. I told him, look, I would like to find ways of further collaboration with the different, like, parish priests. And he invited me. They call it like I forgot, something like the College of the Parish Priests, which is held every month at the Curia. Okay, so imagine me. And he told me, there's a seat here, come and sit beside me. Me sitting next to the bishop. And all these parish priests, okay, these 16 parish priests around the table. It was something which I was in awe of.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, it sounds really good. But your interest in social justice is influencing your work now. You're publishing in this area. This is something you're advocating for. Do you want to say a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's something. I recently published an edited book, Narratives of Educational Leadership, okay, representing research through creative analytic practices, something which I had always dreamed of since doing my PhD, but which I didn't think possible. But it's in the educational leadership and theory series, so I was invited to do this, in which I invited different academics from around the world, so we have different contexts, to problematize a particular leadership issue, but represented through a creative practice, okay? And me, I spoke about my experience of misleading for social injustice in my 4.5 years as a head of college network, in which I collected data. I never meant to write this chapter, but it just came as an afterthought, like after 4 years, through my various experiences, like telephone exchanges I had with heads of schools, email exchanges with parents as well, blogs, informal interviews and even formal interviews, the policy documents themselves, school and college policies, etc. And what I did, I presented this sort of social injustice that I was seeing unfolding in the schools I led, okay? And these heads who are supposed to act as agents of social justice acting otherwise, because of prejudices against these students who are viewed as the other, and created a narrative dramatization, okay? I made up a play of 3 acts from all these data that I collated, and I even inserted the 2 policy documents that speaks specifically about equity and social justice, okay, which are the National Framework and National Policy for Inclusive Education in Malta. And I included them as characters in this play as well, once more to bring out what these policies say should be happening and what was actually happening. And after each scene, I have an interpretation, because I write myself as Denise, okay, in the actual chapter, because I take on many different roles. I am the school principal, I am the narrator, I am the interpreter, I am the researcher, etc. And then it's an interpretation, like a conversation between 3 people. Me, Michel Foucault, okay, who is alive on stage, because I'm very much into his theories of subjectivity, power, governmentality, etc. And the character social justice, okay, which I created from an earlier literature review. And after that, it's under publication at the moment, under review, sorry. I problematized sort of the notion of social justice and putting the onus on schools and on educational leadership to solve all the problems related to it, okay, and to equity, through an actor network theory lens, because sociomaterialism is another sort of theoretical framework which I work with. And over the Christmas holidays, I also finished a policy analysis looking at how equity is dealt with in the Maltese policy scale. And there are things I would like to do further in relation to social justice and how it is practiced in schools, social justice leadership, etc.
Yeah. I love that idea because I think personalizing personalizing the theory and the policy. It's back to your theory practice triage. It's a really interesting motif. I've been saying to people I've been working with, it's different, but it's let's have a dinner party and let's bring the writers that have gone before us that influenced you the most to dinner, and let's talk. And it's really interesting what comes out. So it's not as advanced as what you're doing, clearly, but I think it's a fantastic way of getting deeper behind some, and practical at the same time around some of the thoughts that are happening for people. I like it a lot. It's great. I look forward to it.
Yeah, no, it's a fascinating read. You're engaged with it. Like when people, like there's one point, I think it was at the first scene, and you and Michel Foucault are talking, like your character and Foucault are having a conversation over and back, and it really does captivate you. I've never seen that done before. And so where are your thoughts, Denise, going like now, we'll say with regard to equity and social justice in schools? Where are your thoughts at the moment, and what would you like to see happen in the next few years?
Okay, I can speak about the Maltese education system rather than generally, because that's the system sort of I was educated in and which I am most familiar with because of my career trajectory. At the moment, okay, a lot is being done in terms of inclusion, equity, social justice. But is it enough? No, it's never enough. Because at the moment in Malta, when it comes to equity, there's still the belief that if you provide everybody with the same services, it's fine. No, it isn't, okay? Because that's equality, not equity. Another thing, while in the policy document, they mention the different types of, yes, they do mention physical disabilities, okay, and inclusion, accessible spaces, etc., and embracing differences, etc. A lot of emphasis is still being put on students, for example, with physical disabilities and with learning difficulties, things that are more obvious, whereas other things which are hidden, despite being written about in the policy document, have not been tackled yet. For example, what about students with different religious beliefs, different cultural beliefs, okay, who cannot understand English or Maltese? What about if you have an intersection, okay, of these differences? What's being done? What they are doing is segregation. What does this do? For example, certain students are selected as soon as they arrive, okay, in Malta and register. They attend this migrant school for a year, and they have basic English, Maltese, maths, and 2 other subjects. But then after that year, they have to go into the mainstream. So for me, it's a question of segregation, okay? What good does it do to just educate students for a year? For me, it's a matter of catering for the students, okay? And not seeing them as deficient just because they don't know the Maltese language or the English language, but seeing how they can enrich our culture and educational experiences with their own, okay?
Absolutely. For sure.
So there is a lot that still needs to be done.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. So one of the things we do as we come to a close of our chat is we ask some questions of people, short questions. And one of the questions that we'd like to ask you is a leader who inspires you and why?
A leader who inspires me? Okay. You mean now, currently?
Can be any. Can be from the past, can be from now, whoever comes to mind for you.
Okay. Can I mention 2 at the moment?
Yes.
Okay. For me, Martin Luther King was very inspiring.
Mm.
Okay, still is very inspiring because he went through a lot of obstacles, okay, to fight and get rights for Black people, okay, people of a different skin color. So he always is an inspiration. And someone who is very recent, but who will soon go away from the scene, is the Prime Minister of New Zealand,
Yeah.
Jacinda, okay, who
Yeah.
I fully understand her decision, okay, to step down, but I think she went through very, very tough times. And as a female leader, as a young female leader, okay, she set an example for everybody because she was friendly but firm. She took tough decisions, okay, and she led a huge country through COVID, okay, through the terrorist attacks, through an earthquake. And I'm very sorry to see her go, but I wish her the best of luck. And I know you tell me, how can you compare yourself to her? Were you in the public spotlight? No, but in certain ways, okay, Gozo is a small island. You cannot have everywhere you go, you just go to church. If you go to the supermarket, if you go to the beach, you will find a teacher, a parent, or someone who will stop you in the street and ask you something related to work. So you can never get away from it.
Yeah. That's huge. That is huge. I feel the same about Jacinda Ardern, and I have found inspiration from her, even when I've been sort of in leadership pieces that I haven't been clear about. I've often found myself looking at something that she said or done, and I was really inspired by her decisiveness and her courage, and she was able to balance that with kindness. I thought that was just remarkable. And I'm sorry that she went through the things that she has gone through, and some of it is misogyny. She's had a tough time, and I admire her greatly. So I was really sad when I heard the news that she was stepping down, and I think she's a very inspirational woman leader, and I think there's a lot of us that can gain from looking at her. So I wish her the best. I was thinking, God, could you just write Jacinda Ardern New Zealand and write her a letter? Because I just really feel like maybe I will. I just feel like doing that.
Yeah.
So
Denise, the second question we have for you then is looking back on your journey of leadership. Is there anything that you would do differently?
No, I don't think so. Sometimes, look, when I came to this position here, and I went back home over the holidays, etc. I say, maybe, you know how I told you it was a 24/7 job, etc. I should have given less time to my job and maybe taken more care of my personal and family life. But I knew if I had to do it all over again, I would still give it my full attention. And I don't regret that. I don't regret it. It's something which I loved because it helped me grow, okay, as a person. It helped me grow as a leader. If I hadn't had that tough leadership experience, for example, I wouldn't even be the academic I am now, okay? And I loved the fact that I reached out to everyone, okay, be it the school maintenance personnel, janitors, director generals, etc. Okay, because I believe that everybody should be treated with the same respect, no matter their position. I did make a difference to some students' lives of teachers, etc. And I like it when I still meet people in the street and they ask me why I left, etc. So I'm sure that I would do it all over again.
Yeah. Me too, probably. And if you were to give advice to someone starting out on the journey now, what advice would you give?
Okay, I would tell them it's not going to be easy. Most of the times you're going to feel very lonely because you have to make tough decisions, okay? And you're sort of alone at the top. Do listen to others' opinions, but digest that feedback well, and then make the ultimate decision yourself, and always choose the good, okay? To try and outweigh the bad. You will encounter a lot of obstacles along the way, but don't give up. It's going to be tough, It's part of the fun. Always lead by example. Try to be friendly, but you have to be firm. And you will grow as a leader and learn from your own mistakes and experiences.
I love that. I think that's really good. That is really good advice. I'm going to, not even for somebody starting out, but for somebody who's currently in it, I'm taking that advice to heart. It's been fantastic to talk to you, Denise. I've loved it.
Yeah, and Denise, I think even since we've met, the more that I've even the work that's come out, that you've published even since we've met, like the review, your systematic review at the start of the year, everything you write, it just intrigues me so much, and it always challenges me, and I just can't wait to see everything else that you have coming within academia. I'm really looking forward to it. Stay tuned. More to come.
More to come.
Yeah.
Thank you so
you both.
much.
Thank
Brilliant.
you for this opportunity. Thank you.